it's a pretty easy choice to put it as number 1, since that is a resource that I do go back to every single time. That Triathlon Show 125. Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to another episode of That Triathlon Show, the podcast presented by scientifictriathlon.com. I'm your host Michael, and on today's episode I will list my own top 10 books, blogs and resources for triathletes. As you know, that is a question that I ask all of my guests on this podcast, and today I will give you my own top 10 list. Some of these you will be very familiar with, some of them you may never have heard of even, as they're kind of hidden gems. But before we get to that, this episode is sponsored by Precision Hydration. One thing that you may not know about PH is that in all of the Ötilö Swimrun World Series events, Precision Hydration is the electrolyte drink that is provided at the aid stations. And this is very important, as in long races and with running in a wetsuit especially, hydration becomes a key part of any swimrun event. I've done 2 long swimruns myself, and I can tell you that my second one, and I described that actually in episode 63, so you can go back and listen to that. That was such a better experience and more pleasant experience than the first one, due to the simple fact that I got my nutrition right and I got my hydration right. And guess what I used for hydration? Precision Hydration. And as usual, all That Triathlon Show listeners can get 1 free box of Precision Hydration electrolyte product on precisionhydration.com, and that is your first box when you first order. And if you want to learn more about the swimrun events that cooperate with Precision Hydration, that's fantastic. Go to, I think it's ötilöswimrun.com. I may be mistaken, but just Google swimrun. And their tagline is unique races in unique places. And I'm really excited because the season just kicked off early April, a week or so ago by the time of this recording. And that was the season opener, as usual, in Hvar, which is the queen of the Dalmatian Islands in Croatia. So I recommend that you also go to YouTube and search for Ötilö Swimrun Hvar. And if you want to see something beautiful that cannot not be on anybody's race bucket list, then look for that on YouTube. It is absolutely stunning. And also an announcement that currently the second sponsorship slot is open. So if you have a company that is related to triathlon, or you have contacts in such a company that might be a good fit for That Triathlon Show, please contact me on michael@scientifictriathlon.com to learn more about sponsoring That Triathlon Show. All right, let's get on with today's show. And just one thing that I want to say before getting started with number 10, I will link to all of these resources and books and blogs, whatever they may be, in the show notes on thattriathlonshow.com/TTS125. So you can find them there, so I won't waste any time reading out URLs or similar, but you can find them on the show notes as usual. Number 10 is the Training Peaks blog. And I was wondering if it's good enough to make the top 10 list or not, because there are some brilliant articles there. There are also more, not quite clickbait, I don't want to call it that. I think the quality is much higher than, for example, Triathlete magazine and other triathlon magazines in general on Training Peaks. But there are these generic posts, if you want to call them that don't really give much information. That being said, quite often if I have something that I'm researching or I'm wondering about, I want to learn something new and on a specific topic, I tend to quite often go to the Training Peaks blog and see if anything's been written on there. And quite often I find a really good article that really helps me along to learn about that topic. And if a resource can provide that, I think it's very well worth including. So the Training Peaks blog is a well-deserved finisher on the top 10 list in number 10. Resource number 9 is Twitter, and obviously you need to follow the right people on Twitter, and that depends a bit on your interests. But Twitter in general, the great thing is that you can constantly stay up to date on what people that you respect and learn things from, what they are doing and what they are putting out there from their own research and content, and also what they are retweeting. And that's how you can find new resources that you maybe didn't know existed before. And a lot of these people I have found through resources I've found through other people on Twitter. So just to give you, this is a short list, and there are many more that I follow on Twitter that I really like following. But Jan Lemur, who is at YLM Sports Science, I think, YLM something at least, Asker Jokendrup, Inigo Mujica, Steven Seiler, Matt Fitzgerald, Alex Hutchinson, he's at Sweat Science, Alan Cousins, Louise Burke, and many more. These are all people that I really enjoy following on Twitter and that I learn really a lot from. So that's great. And the brilliant thing about Twitter is actually, depending on who it is, but you can actually, if you have a question about a specific topic, think about who are the top experts in that field, find them on Twitter and send them a message, and you can get an answer, depending on who it is, but quite often you can get an answer directly from the top names in the world on that particular topic. And I think that's something that's absolutely brilliant. If you were to go to Asker Jokendrup for a consultation, I don't know what they would cost you, but it would be expensive probably, and it's well deserved because he's such a fantastic expert. But on Twitter, you might be able to get a direct answer from him if you have a short question that you're wondering about. So Twitter is my number 9. Resource number 8 is a resource that I think that most of you are not at all aware of. And this is especially for those of you who are using running power meters and especially Stride. It's the Paladino Power Project Facebook group and all of Steve Paladino's articles that you can find through that Facebook group. He writes them on a Google Doc blog, essentially, and those are really good. Both they have the background and the science, but they get really practical as well, and there are case studies and all sorts of things. So I think that that's a brilliant library of articles. When I have something that I'm wondering about running with power, that's my first stop. I don't go to the Stride blog, I go to the Paladino Power Project Facebook group and the articles there. And Steve Paladino was our guest in episode, I want to say 93, but I will link to that episode in the show notes to get it right. But I think it's 93, so that is also another interview that I highly recommend you go and listen to, especially if you're using running power meters. Resource number 7 is another blog that I think you probably are not following, and it's a blog of Alan Cousins, and that is on alancousins.com. Alan Cousins was a guest in episode 71 or something. Again, I should have checked these episode numbers before, but I will get it right in the show notes. And this is a blog that is the exact opposite of clickbait articles that you will find on different triathlon magazine websites often. Alan doesn't post too often, and I think it's very understandable, because not only does it take a lot of time to write those articles that he writes, but the actual research that goes into those articles, it's insane, and it's often based on many years of collecting data from his own athletes. He used programming often to extract different variables and investigate different phenomena, and then he shares what he learns on that blog. So I think that is absolutely brilliant, and this it feels like almost like a shame to put it in only place number 7 when you realize how much goes into that. And but Alan Cousins' blog is highly recommended. You can find blog posts on all sorts of topics, like for example, a couple of things that we mentioned in my interview with Alan back in episode 71 were related to testing and lab testing your lactate threshold, testing your VO2 max with a metabolic cart, those sorts of things. And there are a lot of articles related to that, but there are other articles more related to the kind of training you should do leading up to an Ironman, for example, periodization, pacing, all sorts of things. So you can find a lot. I highly encourage you to go there and look at the library, see what piques your interest, and start reading. This is stuff that's not fluff. This is really, really brilliant. Number 6 on the list. It's getting hot here, getting closer to number 1. And this is a podcast, and it's Trainer Road's Ask a Cycling Coach podcast. And also, as a bonus, I will include Trainer Road's blog as well, which also is very good. I think probably a lot of you are already familiar with it. The Ask a Cycling Coach podcast is usually based around listener questions that come into the team from Trainer Road. Chad Timmerman, who is the head coach and head scientist at Trainer Road, was our guest in episode 38. I do know that that is correct, at least. And that was a very good episode that you can go and listen to. Trainer Road, if you don't know, is a cycling software that you can use with when you're training on your indoor trainer. And I've used it a lot. It's brilliant. I like it. And this podcast go into both cycling and triathlon questions that listeners send in. And again, they don't just answer on the cuff. They research beforehand. They pick questions that are interesting for the audience, and they do the research. They go through the science and the experience of of coaches, because they are coaches as well as software developers and whatever roles they have at Trainer Road. So it is, again, a brilliant resource. It is not a lot of fluff, but it's also very entertaining. I really like the banter that they got going on, and you can learn a lot from that podcast. The only minus about it, and it would maybe place even higher on this list if this wasn't the case, but generally, since you have different questions, a single episode can have all sorts of different content in it. Like, for example, you can have an episode with a lot of great discussions on aerodynamics, nutrition, and training strategy in the lead up to your race. But those are 3 very different topics. So even though the content for all of these questions may be great and very useful, it's a bit difficult to bookmark these things and come back to them. So I would really like it if they would make more themed episodes, like one episode where they only take nutrition questions, and even maybe going a bit more narrow than that, and then aerodynamics, training, and those sorts of things. That's the only thing that I could ask more from that. But check out the Trainer Road Ask a Cycling Coach podcast. I know you like podcasts, so definitely go and subscribe to that. And that's my number 6. And number 5, getting into the top half of the list, is the Kinetic Revolution website and YouTube channel by James Dunn. And the tagline of James's website, Kinetic Revolution, and his channel is "Building Better Runners." And he does that by providing fantastic, great, well-researched advice on things like core training, stretching, flexibility and mobility, injury prevention, all these sorts of things that are so crucial but so often overlooked or not done right among both runners and triathletes. And that is basically, if you have a niggle, if you have a hamstring that is a bit tight, what I do in that situation is I always go to the Kinetic Revolution website and I search for hamstring and then I see what comes up and click through and learn all about the problem, the causes, and the prevention methods, the next steps basically. I do the same when I coach, and if an athlete has a niggle, that's where I go first to research advice and make sure that I don't say anything stupid and not well researched. So Kinetic Revolution is my first stop for all things injury prevention, stretching, flexibility, mobility, core training. And that's go and listen to that interview that I did with James in episode 45 as well, because that was a brilliant episode that was very, very well received. Number 4 on this list is Alex Hutchinson's Sweat Science blog, which now resides on Outside Online, the online magazine of Outside Magazine. And also I'll add as a bonus, because I couldn't fit in all of these things that I wanted on the top 10 list, his book Endure: Mind, Body, and the Curiously Elastic Limits of Human Performance. And Alex was my guest in episode 101. Definitely go and listen to that. That's a fantastic episode. The book is fantastic, and the blog is fantastic. And the blog in particular, because you'll find all sorts of different topics. So that's, by the way, I think I mentioned it already, but Alex Hutchinson at Sweat Science is one of my favorite Twitter accounts to follow. He does the same thing as I do on this podcast by diving into the research on various topics and then trying to distill it into what we know, what we don't know, and what the practical applications of it are for endurance sports. And Alex was a top class national level runner as well in his day, so he knows all about the practical side of things as well. So definitely check out the Sweat Science blog and the book Endure by Alex Hutchinson. That is my number 4. My number 3, the first podium finisher here, and you'll notice that I start cheating here. I started already in number 4 by adding 2 resources, essentially, and now I add 3, but I lump them together and call it the Matt Fitzgerald trifecta, and these are my 3 favorite Matt Fitzgerald books. If I have to pick one author that I think is the best endurance sports author, it's definitely Matt Fitzgerald. It would be an easy answer for me to make, no hesitation whatsoever. And his 3 books, I read many more, but the 3 favorite books that I have from him are The Endurance Diet, 80-20 Running, and How Bad Do You Want It? And the Endurance Diet talks about the diet of endurance athletes. It goes into both the science, but also what top athletes in endurance sports actually eat. It has things like food diaries, so you can see and learn from the top athletes what works for them. And so it is a fantastic book and very practical. 80-20 Running is fantastic. It gets into the concept of polarized training that we talked about with David Warden recently. And that is actually something that Matt and David are writing a book called 80-20 Triathlon that will be out this autumn. And I hope that I can get Matt on to talk about that book when it is released. But 80-20 Running will already give you the principles of all of that. And that is something that so many age groupers get wrong. This weekend, for example, it's Monday as I record this episode. And I've lost count of how many times I commented on athletes' sessions that you're running a bit too hard. Stay in zone 2, and that happens in not just in running but also in cycling and to a lesser extent in swimming, I think. And that's not something that we maybe pay as much attention to anyway as coaches. Whether it's good or bad, I don't know. But for running and for cycling, that polarized approach is definitely something that should be adhered to. Although there are always caveats and exceptions, I should say that. But in general, you want to do your easy training easy and your hard training hard. And that is something that, in my experience, most age group triathletes are very, very bad at doing. So you need to read this book to understand why you should follow this strategy of training. And finally, How Bad Do You Want It? Is in the same vein as Alex Hutchinson's book Endure. It's about the mind and how important that is for endurance performance. How you're actually not limited by your muscles or your endurance, your physiology. At the end of the day, it's your mind that imposes those limits on you. You could go faster, muscularly, physiologically, but your mind stops you from doing it. And How Bad Do You Want It is a great story-driven book with a lot of stories and examples from real-world athletes, but also at the same time goes into the science, just like all of Matt's other books, and the practical application. So the great thing about all of these books is that they weave in the science, the practice, and the great writing and the stories from Matt to make it such an enjoyable and easy to read experience. So can't recommend those enough. Again, the books that I recommend are The Endurance Diet, 80-20 Running, and How Bad Do You Want It by Matt Fitzgerald. And that is my top 3, or my number 3 on this top 10 list. So number 2 is the Swim Smooth book in particular, but also the website and the newsletter. The Swim Smooth book is written by Paul Newsome, and now I have to cheat. Adam Young. I was actually peeking over to my bookshelf where I had it. I didn't remember the name of Paul Newsome's co-author. Paul Newsome is, of course, the founder of Swim Smooth. But also check out the website and the newsletter. As I mentioned, both of them are brilliant. But the book goes into all of these things, like the different swimming archetypes, like are you a swinger, are you a smooth, are you an Arnie, are you a Bambino, and you have to get the book or read the website to get the details of what all of these things mean. But depending on your swim type, it will then give you tips for how you can improve your swimming, because what a Bambino should do is not the same as what an Arnie should do to improve their swimming. And so the Swim Smooth book, it goes into all things swimming. It goes into the technique, it goes into the actual training and fitness aspect, and it goes into open water swimming, because it's written specifically for triathletes and open water swimmers. It is not written for pool swimmers. And that is one of the things that makes it unique. It is very well written. It has great images, and which is one of the things that makes it so invaluable. It's invaluable for me in my coaching. I refer to it a lot, and the website and the newsletter complement it very well. But seriously, you should get the book. It will be the best $20 or so you've ever spent, probably, unless you are a competitive pool swimmer by background, in which case you maybe don't need a swimming book. Otherwise, you need to swim, and you need to learn how to swim right, and that goes for both the actual technique and training, and the Swim Smooth book will give you all of that. So Swim Smooth is my number 2. And finally, can we have a drum roll, please? The number 1 on my top 10 list of books, blogs, and resources is the Triathlon Science book that you've heard me refer time and time again. And so it's a pretty easy choice to put it as number 1, since that is a resource that I do go back to every single time. Every time I make an episode, like, for example, the taper episode that I did pretty recently, one of my first stops is always the Triathlon Science book to learn about what we know in a distilled form, and then the Triathlon Science book will give me some references so I can go and have a look at the original publications and studies. But that is, the Triathlon Science is a great starting point for all of those things. It's not just science; it is very practical. It has example training schedules. It has practical takeaways at the end of each chapter. So even if you're not a science geek like myself, you will find it very useful. But the thing that you can rest assured when you get this book is that this is founded in actual science. It's not just one person's opinion, although there will be one main author of each chapter, but that will be one of the best experts in the world on that topic that has been handpicked to write that chapter. And the book will have been edited by Joe Friel and Jim Vance, and probably a lot of others as well will have read all the chapters and commented and proofread and added additional studies. What about this? This goes against what you say here. So this is basically what you need in your triathlon bookshelf. The number 1 book that any triathlete should have, in my opinion, is the Triathlon Science book. And I think that's about it. I don't need to say much more about it. It was a bit of a shorter entry for the Triathlon Science book, but it is still a well-deserved number 1. A lot of the authors of the different chapters of Triathlon Science have been on this podcast, so you can go to the podcast to the website scientifictriathlon.com and click through to podcast and start looking. Obviously, Joe Friel and Jim Vance are the co-editors. Then we have Dave Pease, Gail Bernhardt. We have I think now I forget who has been on. Joanne Dalcutter, David Warden, and maybe Monique Ryan. I'm not sure. Maybe not Monique Ryan. No, actually not. But a lot of others. I keep forgetting who has written the different chapters. But a lot of them have been guests, so go and listen to their episodes on the podcast. And so that was my top 10. But I have a couple of other things that I want to still mention. And first, I want to list a few books, blogs, and resources that probably could have made the list if I was more familiar with them, which I am not, so therefore I couldn't put them on the list. But I have a few of them, and I'll just quickly go through them. But I do strongly believe that these would have been strong candidates for the list if I had read them, listened more to them, watched more, etc. So I encourage you to go and check these out as well. First, we have 80-20 Triathlon by David Warden and Matt Fitzgerald. It's not released yet, but I believe that once it is, it will be on my list, on my top 10 list. Second, we have Training and Racing with a Power Meter. This is probably by far the most recommended resource from all my guests on the podcast. It's by Hunter Allen and Andy Coggan. So great guys. Hunter Allen has been a guest on the show in episode 103, I believe. And I haven't read it, which is a shame, because this is one of the books that you have to read as a triathlete, basically. I'll get to it, but I'm sure it's brilliant because everybody says it is. Then we have Fast After 50 with Joe Friel. Especially if you are approaching that 50 mark, then you want to get this book to learn what it takes. And I can tell you right now that it's VO2 max work and strength training, and focusing a bit on body composition. Those are the three mainstays. Listen to episode 1 with Joe Friel to learn more, but then get the book Fast After 50. Then we have Fast Track Triathlete by Matt Dixon, who was our guest in episodes 12 and 60. And episode 60 is when we talked about this book. I have it in my bookshelf. I've started reading it. I haven't completed it yet. It's great so far, though, so I'm sure it will be great until the very end. This book has the advantage that it also gives you a couple of example training programs if you are interested in that, but it's just a well-written book on what it takes to be a triathlete and balancing that with family, work, and all the other things you got going on. Next, we have the Global Triathlon Network YouTube channel. I watched only a couple of their videos, and they are really good. I think that could be one of the resources that you keep referring to when you're looking for something, and especially something where you want visual representation of whatever it is that you're researching. The Global Triathlon Network YouTube channel could be that. I follow the Global Cycling Network channel for a long time, and that is brilliant, and the Global Triathlon Network seems to be in the same vein. I just haven't used it enough to be able to put it on the list yet. Next, we have the book Endurance Training, Science and Practice by Inigo Mujica. As I mentioned today already when talking about Twitter, and I mentioned in the past, Inigo Mujica is, in my opinion, one of the best endurance sports researchers in the world, and a book that he puts out there, that's going to be brilliant. So that's, I'm just waiting for Steven Seiler to also put out a book, and that will be, my life will be perfect. But I will get to the book by Inigo as well. But that is a book that I highly believe in, and it would probably be honestly in the at least top 5 on my list if I had read it, but I haven't yet. Another not yet released book is by Paul Larson and Martin Buchheit, I believe. And it's called Science and Application of High Intensity Interval Training. I'm not familiar with Martin Buchheit. I am very familiar with Paul Larson, who is a great researcher as well. And so I do believe that this book will be fantastic for endurance athletes. Then we have Cycling Science by Stephen Chang, and we did 2 episodes on this back in episodes 60-something or 70-something with Stephen Chang, who is the co-editor with Mikhail Zabala. And I have actually used this book quite a lot and referenced parts of it, but I just haven't used it enough or started reading it cover to cover in the way that I would like to really be able to put it on the top 10 list. But on the other hand, if this is already something that I go and refer to when I need to check something in terms of cycling. So this could actually have been on my list already, but I do want to read it cover to cover, and when I do, I think it would be a strong candidate for the top 10 list. And then the last one on this list of could have been on the list is the Purple Patch podcast by Matt Dixon again. I have listened to a few episodes, but not enough to be able to yet make a judgment of if it's top 10 list material or not. So I'll let you go, and definitely worth checking out. So go and listen to it and see if it's a podcast that you enjoy. I've enjoyed the episodes 2 or 3 that I've listened to so far a lot. So I think this will be brilliant, and I'm so happy that Matt decided to get into podcasting as well. And I have also another list that is honorable mentions. These are resources that I do use and have gone through quite a lot, but they didn't quite make the top 10 list, but they were strong candidates for it, and if it wasn't so competitive, they could have made it. So first we have ResearchGate. For example, if I go to ResearchGate and search for Inigo Mujica, I'll find a ton of great stuff to get lost in, like all of his publications. Or I can go to ResearchGate and look for publications, just search for interval training, for example, and find publications on that. I can rank by researcher ranking or those sorts of things. I can request PDFs. That's something that I do a lot. Some research articles that aren't open access, you can't really see anything more than the abstract. But on ResearchGate, when you go to them, even if you don't see first of all, quite often, if you don't see the entire article on PubMed, for example, you can still see the entire article on ResearchGate. And when you can't, what you can do is you can request access. You just need to create an account on ResearchGate, which is free, and click request access and send a quick note to the author. And I've never not gotten access to the full text article. So that is how I get access to a lot of articles that otherwise wouldn't be open access, so I could only read the abstract if I wouldn't have ResearchGate. The next is the first book that I've ever read about endurance sports, and that is Daniel's running formula. I almost placed it number 1 on my list when I first started ranking, but then I started thinking that actually triathlon science covers most of these things, but in a triathlon specific way. I still think Daniel's running formula is a must-read for any triathlete that's interested in training, endurance training, and doing it better, learning more. It's a brilliant book, and a lot of it applies to triathlon just as well as running. Next, we have triathlonlive.tv. I really enjoy watching ITU races, the World Triathlon Series, draft legal racing. You can sit on the trainer and watch it. It's brilliant, and it costs like 15 euros per year to get access to all of their races, both live, and then you can watch on demand afterwards. So that's brilliant. Next, bodybuilding.com. As you know, I'm a big fan of strength training, and bodybuilding.com has a great exercise database where you can either just search for a movement and get specific instructions for how to do it with videos, written and audio explanations, or if you know that you want to, for example, get an exercise for your hamstrings, you can filter by hamstring exercises and all sorts of other filters like machine or not machine, etc. So that exercise database in particular is great, but there's also great content on their blog about strength training and nutrition and those sorts of things. So bodybuilding.com is an honorable mention. Sigma Nutrition Radio is another podcast. It's on nutrition, and it takes a variety of angles. Often it is more a strength training or general health perspective, and not specifically endurance athletes. But sometimes it is endurance athletes, and whatever the case may be, you'll learn a lot about nutrition, and this is all based on science. The host has great guests on that podcast. It is by far the best nutrition podcast I've heard, so I highly recommend Sigma Nutrition Radio. And go and browse and pick a few episodes that seem relevant for you, and that will be a brilliant listen to add to your podcast arsenal. Next we have The Core Diet by Jesse Kropelnicki. This book would have made my top 10 if I didn't already have Matt Fitzgerald's Endurance Diet. The Core Diet is it essentially contains the same content as Matt Fitzgerald's, but it's a bit more specific and a bit more technical, which maybe makes it a bit less practical than Matt's book, which is why in the end I decided that Matt's book may be the best for most triathletes, but I do recommend most, especially if you are very interested in nutrition. Then The Core Diet by Jesse Kropelnicki is an excellent choice, and I interviewed Jesse in episode 40, so go and listen to that. Next we have DC Rainmaker's blog on dcrainmaker.com. For any gear, gadgets and gizmos you need to, I'm sure you know about DC Rainmaker. That's where you go to see what power meter is the best, what bike computer is the best, etc. And this could also have been a top 10, but I think it's best that it's not. It's an honorable mention, because I think a lot of age groupers probably spend a bit too much time on DC Rainmaker and thinking about gears and gadgets compared to actually training, and to some extent thinking about their training, but more ideally outsourcing that to a coach. But sometimes you will have to make an investment in, for example, your bike computer crashes and you're used to having one. Well, I completely understand that you want a bike computer, and then the best place to go is DC Rainmaker to see what is currently the best value for money bike computer out there. And then you just get that one. Simple as that. Finally, the Precision Hydration blog. It's a great blog. It's another one in the same vein, not clickbait articles. They are well-researched articles, in-depth and really great, especially about hydration and nutrition. But there are other articles as well, like training articles. I've written a couple of articles there, and just go to precisionhydration.com and click Hydration Advice. That's the name of their blog, and you'll find a ton of articles there. And I could also add the Precision Hydration newsletter to this, because that's where they'll post about these articles when they are released. Alright, so these were my top 10 list of books, blogs and resources, my honorable mentions, and the mentions that could have made the list if I were more familiar with them. As usual, you can find the show notes for this episode on thattriathlonshow.com. You can leave your comments or questions there. I would actually be very interested in hearing what your favorites are. So please give me your top 10 or even your top 3 or however many you want to give. What specific books, blogs and resources did I miss on this list? Let me know in the comments on the show notes section on thattriathlonshow.com. In the next episode, I'll interview Andy Blow from Precision Hydration. He'll make a return appearance, and we'll talk about training for and racing swim runs. It's getting to that time of year, and Andy is a great swim runner. He has competed in the World Championships, and Precision Hydration is very strong in the swim run community, so that will be a great, interesting episode. Look forward to that. Of course, we should also thank Precision Hydration, who is our sponsor for this episode, and you can find them on precisionhydration.com. You can get your first pack of pH for free, and you can take their free online sweat test to find out how much you sweat roughly and how much sodium your sweat contains. And this will allow you to tailor your hydration, your electrolyte strategy for your individual needs. Because remember, hydration is not and will never be a one-size-fits-all. If you enjoyed this podcast, please spread the word, tell your friends about it, share it with your triathlon club. Whatever you can do helps. And thank you, as always, for listening. Keep training smart and keep loving triathlon.